The first time I saw it, I told myself it was compression. A split-second smear on the screen. A glitchy frame. The kind of thing you expect from cheap cameras and a tired internet connection. It happened so fast I almost didn't register it, just a shape where there shouldn't have been one, a figure standing in a hallway that was supposed to be empty. But the problem was the timestamp. The shape appeared at 2:12 a.m., and the feed didn't stutter. The audio didn't pop. The picture didn't tear. The camera looked clean and steady, like it wanted me to see it clearly. And when I rewound the footage to check it again, the hallway was empty. That's when the night stopped feeling like a normal shift. I had taken the job because I needed something mindless. I'd been between apartments, between plans, between versions of myself that made any sense. I had a friend who worked for a security company, one of those places that managed guards and surveillance for warehouses, office parks, medical clinics, the kind of buildings that still needed eyes on them after everyone went home. He said they needed a remote monitor for an industrial site outside town. Overnight. Quiet. No walking patrols. No dealing with anyone. Just sit in a little office and watch the cameras. If a motion alarm tripped, you called it in. If it didn't, you kept your eyes open and tried not to fall asleep. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady and immediate. I was tired of interviewing. Tired of explaining my life to strangers. A night shift where nobody asked questions sounded like a relief. The warehouse sat in a low stretch of industrial lots, where the streetlights were spaced too far apart and the buildings looked like they'd been stamped out of the same mold. Long rectangles. Flat roofs. Loading bays like dark mouths. During the day it was busy, trucks moving in and out, forklifts, people in reflective vests. At night, it emptied out into something still and hollow. My supervisor met me at the gate my first night. He was older, wiry, the kind of guy who'd been doing this so long the job had rubbed all the hurry out of him. He showed me the badge reader, the keys, the little glassed-in office near the front entrance. Inside was a desk bolted to the floor, a swivel chair, a monitor wall with 9 feeds, and a logbook with dates and signatures going back months. Most nights are nothing, he said, like he was reciting it from memory. Doors stay locked. Alarms stay quiet. You write down the hour checks and you go home. He didn't mention cameras. He didn't mention motion sensors. He talked about the building like it was an animal that might or might not wake up. I asked him how often the system glitched. Bad feeds, dropouts, false alarms. He gave a little shrug. Cameras do what cameras do. What does that mean? I asked. He looked at me for a long second, then said, if something looks off, you don't ignore it. You check the basics first. Then you call it in. There was a pause, the kind that implies more. Anything else? I asked. He tapped the logbook with 2 fingers. Write it down. Even if it feels stupid. Then he walked me back out to the gate, and his taillights disappeared down the access road. The lock clicked behind him, loud in the emptiness. For the first hour, the shift was exactly what I'd been promised. The building made its quiet noises. The hum of lights. A distant, occasional ping as the metal cooled. The air conditioner in the security office kicked on and off, blowing stale, cold air that smelled faintly of cardboard and floor cleaner. On the screens, the warehouse looked harmless. Wide empty loading bays. A front lobby with glass doors and a reflection of the monitor wall. Hallways that led into storage areas. A break room with plastic chairs and a vending machine. The feeds had that slightly desaturated look that all security cameras have, like the world had been drained of warmth. Still, nothing moved. Nothing happened. I wrote my check times in the logbook and sipped coffee I didn't really want. Sometime after midnight, I noticed the first odd thing. Camera 6 covered a side corridor near the storage wing. The lights in that corridor were motion triggered, meant to stay off unless someone walked through. On the screen, they were on. All of them. The corridor was empty. I leaned closer, watching for movement. Nothing. No shadows. No flicker of fabric. Just bright hallway lights and closed doors. I waited for the timer to click them off. It didn't. A few minutes later, the lights shut off one by one. Not all at once, sequentially, like a person walking away, setting off each sensor in order as they moved deeper down the corridor. But there was no person. I wrote it down anyway, 108, C6 hallway lights on W/no visible motion. Timed out sequentially. The act of writing made me feel calmer. Like the logbook could pin the moment down, make it less strange. At 1:27 a.m., the same corridor lights came on again. This time they came on in the opposite direction, starting at the far end and moving toward the camera, like something walking closer. I watched until they stopped, halfway down. The lights stayed on. The corridor stayed empty. Then the lights went off, two at a time, not in a clean line. I sat back in my chair, trying to settle the uneasy feeling in my chest. Motion sensors were imperfect. Insects could trigger them. Air movement. A loose wire. Mice in the walls. All normal things. This was a warehouse. It wasn't a haunted house. It was a building full of boxes. I told myself that and tried to move on. Around 2 a.m., the audio monitor pinged. The system had a basic sound alert. If something above a certain volume happened near one of the cameras, a little icon would light up. Most nights it never did. Sometimes a truck passing on the highway would make a low rumble and trip it, or a door would rattle in the wind. The ping came from camera 3, the loading bay. I looked at the feed. Empty dock. Closed bay doors. A pale rectangle of concrete floor. The audio meter showed a spike, like a brief burst of sound. But on the screen, nothing moved. I turned the audio up. All I heard was the low hiss of the microphone and the faint, constant hum of the building. Then, very softly, a sound like someone shifting their weight. A shoe scuff. It was small, human, and close to the camera. I stared at the feed until my eyes started to hurt. Nothing. I turned the volume back down and wrote it in the log. A few minutes later, camera 9 flickered. Camera 9 was the office camera, the one pointed at me. It was meant for accountability, in case something happened and they needed to check the logs against what I did. I hated it. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because it made the quiet feel less private. The image stuttered for half a second and then stabilized. When it did, the feed showed me sitting at the desk like normal. Except the chair behind me, an extra chair I hadn't paid attention to before, was pulled out. I turned around instinctively. There was no extra chair. The office had one chair, mine. No spare. Nothing in the corner. I looked back at the feed. Now the chair behind me was gone too. I felt heat rise in my face, like embarrassment. Like the cameras had caught me jumping at nothing. I told myself it was a visual artifact. A ghost frame. The system combining images incorrectly. I'd seen weird things like that on cheap webcams. Still, I rewound the office feed. The playback showed me sitting still. No chair behind me. No flicker. I scrubbed through the footage frame by frame. Clean. Normal. I let out a breath and forced myself to laugh once, quietly. At 2:12 a.m., I saw the figure in the corridor. It was on camera 6 again, the side corridor near the storage wing. The lights were off. The hallway was dim and grainy, lit only by distant emergency signage and light leak under doors. The figure stood at the far end, near a door that led into the storage area. It wasn't sprinting, or lunging, or doing anything dramatic. It just stood there in profile, like someone who'd paused to listen. I could see shoulders. A head. The outline of arms down at the sides. The figure was too far away for facial detail, but it wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't a shadow from a car passing outside. It was shaped like a person. My mouth went dry. I leaned closer. The feed was stable. The image was clear for a security camera. The timestamp ticked forward normally. The figure didn't move. I sat frozen for a few seconds and then my brain caught up. If someone was inside, I needed to call it in. That was the job. But before I could reach for the phone, the corridor lights clicked on in a line from my end toward the figure, like the sensors were being triggered by something moving along the hallway. The lights reached the far end. And the figure was gone. Not moving out of frame. Not ducking into a doorway. Just gone, as if it had never been there. The hallway was empty, brightly lit, painfully ordinary. My hand hovered over the phone anyway. Then I hesitated. Because if I called dispatch and told them I'd seen a figure, they'd ask where. I'd say camera 6. They'd check the feed. They'd see an empty hallway. Then I'd sound stupid. I hated that thought more than I wanted to admit. The fear wasn't just fear. It was the fear of being wrong. So I did what I'd done before, I rewound the footage. I clicked back 10 seconds. The lights were off. The figure was there. I clicked play. The lights came on. The figure vanished. I hit pause right before the lights reached the end. The figure was still there. I hit play again. Gone. I rewound again and watched 3 more times. Every time, the same thing. The figure existed in the darkness, and then it didn't exist once the lights came on. That should have made me feel better. It should have meant it was something like a camera artifact, some weird effect of low light, compression, the sensor interpreting noise into a human shape. Except the shape was too consistent. Too clean. And the lights triggering in sequence, that implied motion. Something was setting off the sensors. Something I wasn't seeing. I sat there, staring at the bright empty corridor, and tried to slow my breathing. I told myself there was a simple explanation. There always was. I had to trust that. In the logbook, I wrote, 212, C6, possible visual artifact / figure at far end. Rewind shows figure prior to lights. Disappears when lights activate. The words looked ridiculous. Even to me. At 2:17 a.m., the front lobby camera showed the entrance doors unlatching. The doors didn't swing open. The push bars didn't move. But the lock indicator on the frame changed, and the door shifted a fraction of an inch, like the seal had loosened. I stared at it, trying to decide if the camera angle was messing with me. The building's doors were supposed to stay locked all night. Only a badge could open them. And then, without any visible hand or movement, the doors settled back into place and the lock indicator returned to normal. I checked the alarm panel in the office. No breach. No alerts. My stomach felt tight now, like I'd swallowed something wrong. I finally picked up the phone and called dispatch. A woman answered, voice calm and bored the way night dispatch always sounds. Dispatch, she said. This is the overnight monitor at the Grayson distribution site, I said. I'm seeing some weird things on camera 6. Possibly a person in the corridor. Could be an artifact. There was a pause while she pulled up the site's feeds. I'm looking at camera 6 now, she said. Looks empty. I know, I said quickly. It was earlier. When the hallway was dark. When the lights came on it disappeared. Another pause. Could have been noise in low light, she said. Those cameras aren't great. Yeah, I said, relieved she wasn't laughing. Probably. But the motion lights keep triggering too. She sighed softly. Do you have any alarms? No. Any doors open? Not that I can see. Then write it down, she said. If it happens again and you see someone clearly, call back. There was nothing else she could do. I knew that. Still, when I hung up, the office felt smaller. I tried to distract myself by making coffee in the break room. The building's interior corridors were brighter than I expected at night, too clean and industrial, and my footsteps sounded wrong in the empty space. The break room smelled like microwave food and old air. I poured coffee from a machine that had probably been sitting there all day and went back to the office. When I sat down, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The mouse pointer on the monitor wall moved. Just slightly. A small jerk, like someone nudged the mouse. My hands were on the desk, nowhere near it. I stared at the pointer. It stayed still. Then it moved again, drifting toward the playback controls. I felt the hair on my arms lift. I reached for the mouse, and the pointer stopped immediately, like it had been waiting for me to notice. My throat felt tight. Okay, I said quietly to the empty office, then stopped because talking out loud made it feel real. I clicked the office camera feed. The view of me filled the screen. The image was steady. I could see my own face, washed out by fluorescent light. I could see the tension around my eyes. And behind me, on the glass door of the office, there was a faint reflection that didn't match the room. It looked like a hallway. Not the office hallway. A different hallway, darker, narrower, with a door at the end. For a second I thought it was the camera showing a reflection of something on the monitor wall. Then I realized the reflection was moving, slowly. Like someone walking down that other hallway toward the camera. I turned around. The office door was shut, and behind it was the bright corridor outside. No narrow hallway. No door at the end. I looked back at the screen. The reflection was gone. I sat there for a long time, staring at my own face, waiting for the camera to flicker again, to betray what I'd just seen. It didn't. At 3:06 a.m., the loading bay audio pinged again. This time the sound was clearer. A voice. Just one word, too quiet to understand. The audio meter spiked and fell. I turned the volume up slowly, like I was afraid of what might come through. There was silence. Then a sound like someone exhaling near the microphone. And then another word, clearer this time. Hey. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't distorted. It sounded like someone standing just off camera, speaking into empty space. My fingers went numb. I checked the loading bay feed. Empty. The bay doors were closed. The concrete floor was clean. No motion. I watched anyway. The camera's infrared kicked slightly, adjusting, and for half a second the shadows deepened. In that half second, I thought I saw a human outline near the door, like a person standing so still the camera hadn't registered movement. Then the exposure corrected. Nothing. I snapped the volume down, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my jaw. This time I didn't hesitate. I called dispatch again. "This is me again," I said as soon as she picked up. Audio on camera 3 just picked up a voice. She sounded more awake now. A voice? Like what? Like someone said, "Hey." She pulled up the feed again. I could hear her typing. "I'm on camera 3, she said. "I'm not seeing anyone." "I'm not either," I said. But it was clear. There was a pause. "Could be interference," she said, but her voice wasn't as confident. "Those mics are sensitive. Radio bleed. Could pick up, who knows." "Can you send someone?" I asked. Another pause, longer. "We don't have a roving guard in that area tonight," she said. "If you feel unsafe, you can call local police for a drive-by." I swallowed. Calling police for a warehouse camera glitch felt ridiculous. "I'll keep watching," I said. After I hung up, I stared at the monitor wall until my eyes blurred. I tried to rationalize everything. Low light noise. Radio interference. Old sensors. A delayed reflection. The mind is good at building explanations, especially when the alternative is admitting you're alone in a building that doesn't feel empty. But the explanations started to feel thin. Around 3:30 a.m., camera success corridor lights came on again, marching toward the far door. This time, when the lights reached the end, the door at the far end was open. It hadn't been opened before. It was a heavy door with a metal frame, usually shut tight. Now it was open just a few inches, like someone had pulled it and stopped halfway. I leaned forward, breath held, waiting to see a hand, a face, anything. Nothing came out. The door stayed open. I wrote it down with shaking hands, 331, C6 far door ajar. Then I did something I shouldn't have done. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the office. The hallway outside was bright and empty. My footsteps sounded too loud. The air felt colder out here, and the building's hum seemed louder, as if I'd walked closer to its bones. I moved slowly toward the storage wing, following signs, passing closed doors. I told myself I would just check the basics. Make sure the door on camera 6 was shut. Confirm there wasn't a simple physical reason for what I'd been seeing. That would calm me down. The further I walked, the quieter it got. The hum of the lights faded. The corridor narrowed. The air smelled more like cardboard and dust. When I reached the intersection where camera success corridor started, the motion lights clicked on ahead of me, one by one, like the building had noticed I was there. My stomach tightened. I walked forward anyway. The lights brightened the hallway in sections as I moved. At the far end, the door was shut. I stopped several meters away, staring at it. It looked normal. Heavy. Closed. No gap. I walked closer, forcing myself to keep moving, and pressed my hand against it. It was cold, solid. I tried the handle. Locked. My breath came out in a slow, shaky exhale. So the door on the camera feed must have been an illusion. The feed must have glitched. That was good. That meant I was building fear out of nothing. Then I heard something behind me. A faint sound, like fabric brushing a wall. Not loud enough to locate precisely. I turned quickly, flashlight up. The corridor behind me was empty. Bright. Still. But the motion lights behind me were still on, even though I hadn't moved in that direction. I stood there, flashlight beam shaking slightly, and realized something uncomfortable. The motion lights were supposed to shut off behind you as you walked away. They hadn't. They were staying on. As if the sensors were still being triggered. As if someone was standing behind me in the lit hallway, perfectly still, close enough to keep the lights alive. I didn't run. I didn't scream. My body did something quieter and worse, it locked up. I stood there and listened, trying to hear breathing, footsteps, anything. All I heard was the hum of the lights and my own pulse. Slowly, without turning my back fully, I started walking backward toward the office corridor. The lights stayed on. I kept my flashlight pointed ahead of me as if it mattered. When I reached the intersection and the brighter main corridor, I finally turned fully and walked faster, not quite a run, but close. I didn't look back until I was inside the office with the door shut. I checked the monitor wall immediately. Camera 6 showed the corridor I'd just left. Empty. All the lights were off. Every single one. As if the hallway had never been lit at all. I stood there, hand on the office door, trying to slow my breathing. And then the office camera, camera 9, showed the hallway outside my door. In that feed, the corridor lights outside the office were dimmer than they should have been, like the exposure had been pulled down. And in the dimness, right outside my door, there was a shape. Not a full person, not clearly. Just the outline of someone standing close to the door, facing it. The shape didn't move. My hand tightened on the doorknob. I looked at the hallway through the office window. Bright. Empty. I looked back at the camera feed. The shape was still there. Then, very slowly, it leaned forward. Like it was putting its ear against the door. And the feed cut to black. All 9 camera feeds went black at once. Not static. Not snowy interference. Just black screens. The little red rec indicator stayed on, which meant the system thought it was still recording. My throat went dry. I stared at the black wall of monitors, waiting for them to come back. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the screens snapped back on one by one. Front entrance. Loading bay. Rear lot. Storage. Hallways. All normal. Camera 9, the office camera, came back last. When it did, it showed me standing by the office door, frozen in place. And behind me, reflected faintly in the glass, was that narrower hallway again. The one that didn't exist. This time, the hallway in the reflection wasn't empty. A figure stood at the far end, facing toward the camera. It didn't move. It just stood there as if it had been waiting for the camera to come back on. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I stared at the reflection on the screen until my eyes watered. Then the figure in the reflection raised its hand. Not waving. Not threatening. Just pointing. Directly toward me. And the office door handle, under my hand, clicked as if someone from the outside had tried to turn it. I let go of the handle like it burned me. For a second I just stood there with my hand hovering in the air, not trusting my own nerves, not trusting the sound I'd heard. Then it clicked again. A gentle, deliberate movement, like someone testing the latch. I backed away from the door slowly, eyes on the monitor wall. The office camera feed showed me stepping back. The reflection in the glass behind me was still there, still showing that narrow hallway. The figure in the reflection remained at the far end, unmoving, like it had already done whatever it came to do. On the real hallway feed, camera 7, the corridor outside my office, there was nothing. No one. No shadow. Just bright empty space. I wanted to believe the real hallway, not the reflection. But the reflection kept returning, like a bruise you can't stop pressing. I sat down, because standing made me feel exposed. The chair felt too cold. I reached for the logbook, not because I thought writing would fix anything, but because it gave my hands a job. The pen shook slightly between my fingers. 3:48, system blackout, all feeds approximate 4 seconds. Possible figure outside office door visible on C9 only. Reflection anomaly visible again. The words looked insane on paper. I hated that. I hated that my own handwriting made it feel more real. I checked the time. 3:49 a.m. I did what my supervisor told me to do, check the basics first. I checked the alarm panel. Green. I checked the badge reader logs on the system. This office had a small keypad that displayed recent badge swipes. The log showed my entry at 9:56 p.m. and nothing after. No one had badged in. No one had badged out. Then I checked the doors on the cameras again. All closed. All locked. My mind kept circling the same thought: if there's no one in the building, why does it feel like someone is trying so hard to be noticed? The loading bay audio pinged again. I flinched so hard my shoulders ached. This time I didn't turn the volume up right away. I stared at the audio meter. It showed a slow, steady increase, like someone was speaking softly close to the microphone. But the sound was too low to trigger the normal alert threshold. The meter wasn't spiking. It was rising and falling as if there was a voice, but it didn't want to be fully heard. I forced myself to turn the volume up just enough. At first, all I heard was the building hum. Then, very faint, a phrase. Not clear. Not a sentence. Just enough to make out syllables. Can you see? My skin prickled. The camera feed showed the empty loading bay. Nothing moving. Closed doors. The voice came again, clearer now, closer to the microphone. Can you see me? I felt my mouth go dry. I didn't answer. There was no button to answer. These cameras weren't two-way. There was no reason anyone should be able to ask me anything through them. Unless the system was picking up another frequency. Another conversation. Someone on a radio channel nearby. But it sounded like it was right there. The audio meter rose again. A soft exhale. Then, look. My eyes snapped to camera 6 instinctively. The corridor was dark again. The motion lights were off. At the far end, in the grainy darkness, the figure stood exactly where it had stood earlier. It was closer now, or maybe the camera had adjusted, because the outline was clearer. Shoulders. Head. Arms. Still no facial detail. I stared at it, frozen. The corridor lights clicked on again, one by one, marching toward the figure. I held my breath, watching for the moment it vanished. The lights reached the far end. And the figure was still there. Not vanished. Not gone. Standing in full fluorescent light, in the middle of the corridor like it belonged there. For a split second, relief hit me, because if it stayed visible with the lights on, it was real. It meant I hadn't been hallucinating. It meant there was an actual person in the building, and there were procedures for that. Then something worse happened. The figure wasn't looking toward the camera. It wasn't facing down the corridor at all. It was facing sideways, toward a wall. Toward a blank stretch of painted concrete where there was nothing to see. It stood close to the wall, head tilted slightly, like someone studying something up close. Then it lifted its hand and placed the palm against the wall. The motion was slow, careful, almost gentle. The loading bay audio crackled softly. And the voice, still calm, said, "There." A cold pressure settled in my chest. Because the wall the figure touched was not an exterior wall. It was the wall that backed up to the security office. My office. I stared at camera 6, at the figure's hand pressed to the wall, and my brain tried to reject what that implied. The corridors on these feeds didn't map cleanly in my head. Warehouses were mazes. Corners and wings and identical doors. I told myself I could be wrong. So I did something I should have done earlier. I pulled up the building map. There was a laminated floor plan in the binder. I spread it out on the desk with shaking hands and traced the corridor labeled, "Storage Wing Access." Camera 6. I followed it to the point where it met the thick line of walls. And there it was, the corridor ended along the wall of the security office block. The figure was touching the wall that was, on the other side, the wall behind my desk. The wall directly behind me. My throat tightened. I turned slowly and looked at that wall. It was plain. Off-white. Scuffed near the baseboard. There was nothing there. No sound, no movement, no shadow. I looked back at the camera feed. The figure's hand was still pressed to the wall. Then it slid its palm downward, slowly, like it was searching for something by touch. The loading bay audio hissed. "Closer," the voice said. I backed my chair away from the desk. My legs wanted to stand, to run, but my brain was trying to keep up, trying to make sense. If someone had gotten into the building, how had they bypassed the badge logs? If someone was inside, why stand still? Why touch a wall? Unless the camera wasn't showing live video. Unless what I was seeing wasn't happening now. That thought was almost comforting. A playback issue. Old footage accidentally looping. Something in the system out of sync. I clicked the timestamp overlay on camera 6. The time read 3:54 a.m. The same as the clock on my desk. Live. I clicked the playback control and rewound 10 seconds. The corridor went dark, the lights off, the figure standing at the far end. I hit play. The lights marched on. The figure remained. It touched the wall. It slid its hand down. The voice on the loading bay said, "Closer." The exact same sequence, every time. Not random. Not incidental. Like a recording being played exactly as intended. My skin went cold. I heard something in the office then. Not from the speakers. Not from the monitors. From the wall behind me. A soft, gentle sound, like fingertips brushing painted drywall. I froze. I listened hard. The sound came again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Slow. Deliberate. Not a mouse. Not a pipe. Not settling metal. Something like nails lightly dragging across the wall, as if someone on the other side was tracing lines. The figure on camera 6 moved its head slightly, the smallest motion, like it was listening too. Then it turned its face toward the camera. For the first time, I could see it more clearly. It was a person. An actual person. Not a shadow. Pale face. Short hair. No visible uniform. Nothing dramatic. But the person's expression wasn't threatening. It was flat. Like someone who's exhausted, or someone who's already accepted something. The person lifted a hand again and pointed, this time not toward the wall, but directly toward the camera. Toward me. The voice from camera 3 came through one more time, very soft. "Found you." The scratching on the wall behind me stopped. Silence filled the room so completely it felt physical. I realized then that I had been holding my breath for too long. I forced air into my lungs. And the office door handle clicked again. I didn't look at it. I didn't want to confirm whether it was moving. Instead, I did the one thing I hadn't done yet, I called 911. My fingers were clumsy on the phone keypad, but I managed. The line rang once and an operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at the Grayson distribution warehouse, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm the overnight monitor. I think there's someone inside the building. Are you in immediate danger? The operator asked. I stared at the wall behind the desk. The silence felt like a held breath. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm in the security office. Doors are locked. Stay on the line, she said. Officers are on the way. Do not leave your secure location. Secure location. The word sounded wrong in my head. I kept the operator on speaker and watched the monitors like they were the only solid thing left in the room. On camera 6, the figure stood motionless. Still facing the camera. On camera 3, the loading bay remained empty. Then, very slowly, the figure on camera 6 stepped backward. Not walking away. Just stepping back, like it was making room for something else. The corridor lights flickered. The camera's exposure pulsed. And for a split second, the image showed something behind the figure. Not a person. Not clearly. A darker patch of space that shouldn't have been darker, as if the air itself was different there. Then the exposure corrected and it was gone. The figure remained, now slightly further back, hands at its sides. I felt an awful, creeping certainty that I wasn't watching someone break in. I was watching someone show me something. The operator asked me to describe what I saw. I tried. I stumbled through it. A person in the corridor. Cameras glitching. A voice on the audio. She asked if I could see the intruder's face. Yes, I said. But, It's not, it's normal. Are they armed? I don't know. They're just standing there. Silence on the line for a beat. Officers will arrive in approximately 5 minutes, she said. Can you confirm your exact location in the building? I started to answer, and then the monitors went black again. All of them. This time the black lasted longer, 10 seconds, maybe more. Long enough for panic to flood my chest like ice water. Then the screens returned. But not to live feeds. Every camera showed the same image. The narrow hallway. The one that didn't exist. It was longer than it had looked in the reflections. Narrow walls. A door at the far end. Dim lighting that didn't match the warehouse's fluorescent glare. And at the far end, near the door, the figure stood facing straight toward the camera. Toward me. The operator's voice sounded distant now, muffled by my own heartbeat. I stared at the identical feeds. 9 copies of the same impossible hallway. The figure lifted one hand and knocked on the door behind it. Knock. Knock. The sound didn't come through the speakers. It came from inside my office. From the wall behind my desk. Knock. Knock. I turned slowly, eyes fixed on the wall. There was no door there. Just painted drywall. Knock. Knock. The operator's voice sharpened. Sir. Are you still with me? I hear it, I whispered, and my throat felt raw. It's inside the wall. A pause on the line. Then, carefully, can you move to a safer area? There was nowhere safer. The only door out of the office was the door with the handle that kept clicking. The emergency exit was down the hall. To reach it, I'd have to leave the office and walk past cameras that weren't showing the warehouse anymore. The monitors all showed the same narrow hallway. The figure waited at the far end. It felt like I was being asked a question. The figure raised its hand again. This time it pointed not toward me, but toward the door at the end of that hallway. As if telling me where to go. My skin prickled with a cold fear that wasn't about danger in the normal sense. It was about control. About being guided. I backed away from the desk and toward the office door. I didn't touch the handle. I didn't want to. Instead, I looked at the lock. It was a simple deadbolt. I slid it. The bolt moved smoothly, clicking into place. The door handle stopped clicking. For a moment, everything went still. The knocking in the wall stopped. The monitors remained on the narrow hallway. The figure didn't move. The operator said my name again, more sharply. I locked the door, I said. I'm staying in here. Good, she said. Officers are close. Do you have any other exits from that room? No, I said. The hallway on the screens flickered. For a second, I saw the warehouse corridor again, bright, empty. Then the narrow hallway returned. The figure was closer now. Not by walking. Not by moving through the space. Just closer, as if the camera had skipped frames and the figure had advanced without the motion in between. My stomach lurched. The operator's voice continued, asking questions, but I barely processed them. The figure was close enough now that I could see more detail. Its clothes were plain, dark jacket, dark pants. Not a uniform. Its face was pale, eyes open, expression still flat. It looked tired. Not angry. Not excited. Just tired. The figure lifted its hand and pressed its palm toward the camera lens, as if it was touching the glass. At that exact moment, I felt pressure on the wall behind my desk. Not a hit. Not a punch. A gentle push, like someone leaning their weight against it. The drywall gave a tiny creak. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. The office felt suddenly too small for air. I stared at the monitors, and the figure stared back, palm still raised. Then, on the screen, the figure's lips moved. No audio came through. But I could read the shape of the words. Checked. My eyes flicked to the logbook on the desk. The pen I'd been using lay beside it, unmoving. And then the page turned. Not by my hand. The paper lifted and flipped as if moved by a breeze that didn't exist. The open page was blank except for my last entry. 3:48, system blackout. The pen rolled slightly, then stopped. I watched, frozen, as the pen lifted. Not levitating like a magic trick, no, it rose in a way that looked almost mechanical, like someone was holding it just out of sight. The tip touched the paper. And it wrote one word. Checked. The pen set itself down gently and rolled back to its original position. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. On the line, the operator said, "Officers are at the gate. Do they have access?" I swallowed. "They need a badge," I said. "Can you buzz them in?" The thought of unlocking the gate made my stomach turn. The thought of moving at all felt dangerous. But the alternative was being alone with whatever this was. "I'll try," I said, voice thin. I forced myself to step toward the desk. Each movement felt like wading through thick water. I reached the gate control panel, just a small button that would unlatch the entrance gate. I hesitated. The figure on the monitors tilted its head slightly, like it was curious. My finger hovered over the button. And then my phone screen lit up. Not a call. Not a message. A notification from the camera system. Remote login detected. My throat closed. Remote login meant someone had accessed the camera system from outside the building. That was possible. The security company could log in. Dispatch could log in. But why would the system notify me now? Another notification appeared beneath it. User, admin. Then a third. Camera source changed. I stared at the monitors again. The narrow hallway feed remained. The figure was gone. The hallway was empty. At the far end, the door slowly opened inward. Just a crack. Then wider. Beyond it was darkness. A darker darkness than any unlit warehouse room should have had on camera. And then, from my office wall, I heard a sound I'll never forget. Not knocking. Not scratching. A soft, satisfied exhale. Right behind my head. I spun so fast my neck strained. Nothing was there. The air in the office felt colder, like the AC had kicked on hard, but it hadn't. On the phone line, the operator said, "Sir. Are you still there?" "Yes," I whispered. "Officers are requesting entry," she said. "Can you open the gate?" I looked at the gate button again. I pressed it. Outside, on camera 2, front lot, the gate slid open. 2 sets of headlights pulled in, slow and cautious. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. The monitors flickered, and the camera system returned to normal feeds. Warehouse corridors. Loading bay. Lobby. Camera 6 showed the corridor empty, lights off. Camera 3 showed the loading bay empty. Camera 9 showed me standing at the desk, shaking. The officers approached the front doors. The badge reader flashed red. Of course it did. They didn't have a badge. They knocked. I didn't want to leave the office, but I also knew the front door release was in the lobby. I'd have to walk out, cross the corridor, and unlock it manually. The operator told me to wait for the officers to make forced entry if needed. But they didn't want to. They wanted me to open it. I stared at the corridor feed. Empty. I stared at the office door. Locked. I swallowed and unlocked it. The handle didn't click this time. I stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I walked quickly toward the lobby, not looking at the side corridors, not looking at the storage wing entrance. In the lobby, I could see the officers through the glass doors. Two men in uniforms, faces serious, hands resting near their belts. Real people. Real help. I unlocked the door and let them in. They asked where the intruder was. I tried to explain. Cameras showed a figure. The feeds changed. The system blacked out. The audio spoke. They exchanged looks. One of them asked to see the monitors. We walked back to the office together. The monitor wall was normal now. All feeds live. All empty. They watched the corridor feeds. Nothing. They checked door alarms. Nothing. They did a walkthrough of the building while I stayed in the office with the other officer. They cleared rooms, checked bays, checked exits. Everything locked. Everything empty. After 20 minutes, one of them came back and said, "No signs of forced entry. No one inside." He looked at me with that careful, measured expression people use when they're trying not to make you feel embarrassed. "You sure you didn't see a worker who stayed late?" he asked. "No," I said. "It was a person on camera. It kept disappearing. The feeds changed." He nodded slowly like he'd heard stranger things. Maybe he had. "What about a prank?" he asked. "Someone with remote access?" I glanced at my phone, still lit with the admin login notification. "I got a remote login alert," I said. He asked to see it. He read it, then looked at the monitor wall. "Who has admin access?" he asked. I didn't know. Dispatch? The security company. IT. He told me to report it to my supervisor. They stayed until I calmed down enough to be alone again, but I wasn't alone. Not really. Not anymore. The idea of being alone in that building felt impossible now. When the officers left, I called my supervisor. He answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. I told him what happened. I told him about camera 6. The hallway. The figure. The remote login alert. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, very softly, "Did it write in the book?" My stomach tightened. "How did you?" "Did it?" he repeated. "Yes," I said. "It wrote, checked." Another pause. Then he said something that made my skin go cold. "Don't work that site again," he said. "What is it?" I asked. "What's going on with those cameras?" He exhaled, slow and tired. "Those cameras," he started, then stopped, like he was choosing words carefully. "That system has been there a long time. Different companies. Different admins. People come and go. That doesn't explain." "It doesn't," he said quietly. "I know. But you don't go back. You hear me? You don't go back." I waited, hoping he'd say more. He didn't. He just said, "I'll mark you as reassigned," and hung up. When the shift finally ended, I drove home in daylight, feeling like I'd done something wrong just by looking too closely. I didn't sleep much that day. I kept seeing the narrow hallway in my mind, the one that didn't exist, the door at the end, the dark beyond it. That night, I checked my phone out of habit at 2:12 a.m. I wasn't trying to. My body just did it. The screen lit up. A notification sat there from the security camera app one hadn't installed, because I didn't have admin access, because I wasn't supposed to have it. But the icon was there anyway, like it had always been there. The notification read, "New clip available." My stomach turned. I stared at it for a long time before tapping it. The clip opened. It was from camera 9. The office camera. It showed me sitting at the desk the night before, looking tired, glancing up at the monitor wall. The clip timestamp read 2:12 a.m. In the video, the office door behind me was closed. Then, very slowly, the handle turned from the outside. The door didn't open. The deadbolt held. But the handle turned fully, like someone testing it. Then, on the glass of the office door, a reflection appeared, faint at first. The narrow hallway. The one that didn't exist. At the far end of it, the figure stood still, watching. The clip ended before anything else happened. My hands were shaking. I tried to delete the clip. There was no option. I tried to close the app. The app wasn't in my app list. I checked my phone settings. Nothing. But when I turned the screen off, a final notification appeared on the lock screen. One word. Checked. I didn't go back to that job. I didn't even go back to night work. But the strange part is, the fear didn't stay tied to the warehouse. It moved into smaller things. A security camera at a gas station. A doorbell camera on a neighbor's porch. The grainy black and white view of a night street on someone's phone. I started noticing the way cameras see the world, how they flatten it, how they miss things, how they create shapes out of noise. And every time a camera feed glitches, every time a frame smears, every time a shadow looks almost human for a split second, I feel my stomach tighten like it did in that office. Because I learned something I didn't want to learn. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what the camera captures. It's what it convinces you is there, just long enough for you to look. And now, every time I catch myself staring at a screen too long, waiting for something to move, I remember that word in the logbook. A word that didn't feel like a record. It felt like a mark. Like something was making sure I'd been seen. And if my phone ever lights up at 2:12 a.m. with a notification I didn't ask for, I don't open it. I just set the screen face down and sit in the dark, listening to the silence. Wondering what, exactly, is checking on me now.